The morning sky over New York turned silver as the alien ships came down. They were huge, like floating cities made of crystal and metal. Their shadows covered entire neighborhoods as they moved slowly through the clouds. People stopped walking on the streets and looked up. Cars pulled over. Everyone stared at something they had never seen before. Elizabeth Harper was having coffee in the White House when her phone rang. She was 68 years old and had been president for 3 years. Before that, she had been a Marine for 20 years. She had seen war and peace, victory and defeat. But she had never seen anything like this. "Madam President, we have visitors," her chief of staff said over the phone. His voice was shaking. "Big ones." Within an hour, the aliens sent a message. They wanted to meet at the United Nations building. Every world leader was invited. The message was polite but cold, like a teacher talking to children who had misbehaved. Elizabeth arrived at the UN building with her team. General Jake Morrison walked beside her. He was 55 years old and had more scars than any soldier should have. He had fought in 3 wars and commanded armies across the world. His face never showed fear, and it did not show fear now. Dr. Alan Cross was also there. He was the smartest man Elizabeth knew about space and aliens. For 10 years, he had been listening to radio signals from the stars. He had built machines to decode alien languages. Most people thought he was crazy. Today, everyone wished they had listened to him. Inside the UN building, delegates from every country sat in their seats. The big hall was full but quiet. Everyone was waiting. Then the doors opened and the alien walked in. He was 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin that looked like purple scales. His eyes were large and had many colors, like looking into a kaleidoscope. When he moved, his body flowed like water. He wore robes that seemed to shine with their own light. The alien walked to the center of the room. He did not seem impressed by anything he saw. He looked at the humans the way a person might look at ants. "I am Ambassador Zexthul of the Vortanian Empire," he said. His voice came from a small device on his chest that turned his words into English. "I speak for the Galaxy Council, the rulers of 47 star systems." Elizabeth sat in her chair and watched. She had negotiated with dictators and kings. She knew how to read people, even alien people. This one thought humans were nothing more than bugs. "You call your world Earth," Zexthul continued. "We call it Sol 3. You are a young species. You have only just learned to leave your world and visit others. This is normal. All species go through this stage." He waved one of his 4 hands, and pictures appeared in the air above him. They showed human cities on Mars, mining stations near asteroids, and a huge ship flying toward another star. "But you have made a mistake," the alien said. "You have expanded beyond your birth world without permission. You have built colonies and fleets. This violates Galactic Accord 7749, established 5,000 years before your species learned to make fire." The room was so quiet that Elizabeth could hear people breathing. She looked around and saw fear on many faces. But not on Jake Morrison's face. Not on Dr. Cross's face. And not on her own. "Young species are dangerous," Zexthul said. "They fight wars. They destroy things. They do not understand the proper order of the galaxy. This is why the Council exists. We guide new species. We protect them from themselves." He turned his kaleidoscope eyes toward Elizabeth. She felt like he was looking right through her. "Therefore, the Galaxy Council demands that your species surrender. You will abandon your colonies. You will destroy your warships. You will accept protectorate status under our guidance. We will teach you how to be civilized." Elizabeth had heard enough. She stood up slowly, the way she had learned in the Marines. Every eye in the room was on her now. Every camera in the world was recording her. "Thank you for coming all this way to talk to us," she said in a clear voice. "We appreciate your concern, but I am afraid we will have to decline your offer." The alien's eyes grew wider. For the first time since entering the room, he looked surprised. "Perhaps your translation machine is broken," he said. "This was not an offer. This was an order. You must surrender." Elizabeth smiled the way she used to smile at enemy generals who thought they had won battles before they had fought them. "Oh, we understood you perfectly, Ambassador," she said. "The answer is still no." A sound like wind went through the room as people began to whisper. Some delegates looked scared. Others looked excited. A few looked like they wanted to laugh. Dr. Cross leaned forward in his chair. For months he had been studying the alien messages that came before today. He had learned things about the Galaxy Council that they did not know he knew. He had shared these things with Elizabeth and Jake. They had made plans. "You do not understand what you are refusing," Zexthul said. His voice was getting louder. The Council has fleets of thousands of ships. We have weapons that can destroy entire worlds. Your species has barely learned to fly between planets. We could eliminate you all in a single day. General Morrison stood up. He was not as tall as the alien, but he filled the space around him with quiet strength. Ambassador, he said in a voice that had commanded soldiers in battle, you might want to think about who you are threatening. The alien looked at him with something that might have been amusement. Are you threatening me, primitive one? Do you think your small ships and basic weapons could stand against the might of the Galaxy Council? Elizabeth stepped forward. She had made her decision the moment the alien ships appeared in Earth's sky. Actually, she had made it years ago, when Dr. Cross first told her what was really happening in the galaxy. We are not threatening you, she said. We are informing you. Humanity will not surrender. We will not abandon our colonies. We will not accept your rule. If you want to fight us, that is your choice. But remember that you came to our world and made demands. We are simply defending our home. The alien's forearms moved in patterns that looked like anger. You are making a terrible mistake, he said. The Council has crushed dozens of species who refuse to accept guidance. Your world will burn. Your people will die. All of this could be avoided if you simply accept the wisdom of your betters. Dr. Cross stood up and walked toward the alien. He was not afraid. He had been preparing for this day for 10 years. Ambassador, he said, there are some things about humanity that you might not understand. We have been watching you for a long time. We know about your council. We know about your enemies. We know about species that have fought against you and lost. The alien's eyes focused on Dr. Cross like weapons aiming at a target. What are you implying, primitive one? Elizabeth moved to stand beside Dr. Cross. Jake Morrison joined them. 3 humans facing 1 alien in a room full of watching delegates from around the world. We are implying that you have made assumptions about us that might not be correct, Elizabeth said. You assume we are weak because we are young. You assume we are alone because we are new to space. You assume we will surrender because others have surrendered before us. She paused and looked directly into the aliens. Kaleidoscope eyes. You have assumed wrong. The room exploded into noise as delegates began talking all at once. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But Elizabeth only watched the alien ambassador as understanding began to show on his strange face. The war was about to begin. 3 hours after Elizabeth Harper told the alien ambassador no, every television on Earth was showing the same thing. Emergency broadcasts filled the airwaves. The president was about to speak to the world, and everyone knew their lives were about to change forever. Elizabeth sat at her desk in the Oval Office. Behind her stood General Jake Morrison and Dr. Alan Cross. All 3 looked calm, but not the kind of calm that comes from peace. It was the calm that comes from finally being able to tell the truth after years of keeping secrets. My fellow Americans and citizens of the world, Elizabeth began, looking directly into the camera. Today, humanity received an ultimatum from beings who call themselves the Galaxy Council. They demanded our surrender. I told them no. She paused, letting those words sink in around the world. I told them no because we are not defenseless. We are not unprepared, and we are not alone. In living rooms and offices across Earth, people leaned closer to their screens. In the UN building, Ambassador Zexthul watched from his guarded room. His forearms folded in what humans were learning meant confusion. For 30 years, Elizabeth continued, we have known about the Galaxy Council. We have known about their laws, their fleets, and their habit of forcing young civilizations to surrender their freedom. We have been preparing. The camera pulled back to show General Morrison stepping forward. His scarred face was serious but not worried. The ships you see in our sky represent 72 vessels from the Council fleet, he said in his command voice. What they do not know is that we have been building our own fleet for 20 years. Hidden shipyards in the outer solar system have been working day and night. We have over 300 warships ready for battle. Dr. Cross moved to stand beside the general. He held a small device that projected holographic images into the air. The Galaxy Council believes they are the strongest force in the galaxy, he said. But they have enemies, species they have conquered who want their freedom back. We have been talking to these species for 15 years. We have been sharing technology. We have been making friends. The hologram showed star maps with dozens of systems marked in different colors. Green dots showed human allies. Red dots showed Council territory. There were far more green dots than anyone expected. In his room at the UN building, Ambassador Zexthul stood up so fast he knocked over a chair. This was impossible. His species had rules about monitoring primitive worlds. How had the humans learned so much without being detected? The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Roy Patterson appeared on screens around the world, broadcasting from the bridge of a ship that looked like nothing Earth had ever built before. Behind him, his crew worked at stations that combined human design with alien technology. "This is Captain Patterson of the UES Defiance," he said. "I am speaking to you from a position 3 million kilometers beyond Pluto. My ship is one of 50 vessels in the outer fleet. We have been patrolling the edge of our solar system for 5 years, making sure the Council could not surprise us." The camera on his ship turned to show the view outside. Space was filled with human ships, but they did not look like the rockets and shuttles people were used to seeing. These were sleek warships with hulls that seemed to bend light around them. "The generation ship you have heard about, the one heading to Proxima Centauri, is not our first interstellar vessel," Patterson continued. "It is simply the first one we allowed the Council to detect. We have had colonies beyond our solar system for 8 years. Back on Earth, Elizabeth returned to her address. She knew that around the galaxy, other species were watching these broadcasts through networks Dr. Cross had helped establish. "To the people of the galaxy who suffer under Council rule," she said, "we offer you hope. Earth stands ready to fight alongside any species that wants freedom. We have technology to share. We have ships to lend. We have soldiers ready to die for liberty." She turned to look directly at the camera and threw it at every human being on Earth. "To my fellow humans, I will not lie to you. War is coming. The Council will not accept our refusal peacefully, but we have advantages they do not expect. We have prepared for this day for 3 decades. Most importantly, we have something they do not understand." General Morrison stepped forward again. "The Council fights wars the way they run their government," he explained. "Everything is planned. Everything follows rules. They expect their enemies to fight the same way. But humans do not fight fair. We fight to win." Dr. Cross activated his holographic display again. This time it showed detailed schematics of Council ships and weapons. "We have been studying their technology for years," he said. "Every message they sent us contained information about their capabilities. Every diplomatic contact taught us about their weaknesses. They are powerful, but they are predictable." The broadcast switched to show Admiral Lisa Chang in what looked like a military command center built inside a mountain. Banks of monitors showed activity all across the solar system and beyond. "This is Fleet Command," Admiral Chang announced. "All human forces are now at battle stations. Colonial militias in 14 star systems have been activated. Our alien allies are moving their fleets into position. The Council wanted a war. They are about to get one they did not expect." In space near Earth's moon, aboard the Council flagship Eternal Dominion, Fleet Commander Vexmar received reports that made no sense. His sensors were detecting human ships everywhere, far more than should have existed. Worse, his long-range communications were picking up coded transmissions from species that should have been loyal to the Council. Ambassador Zexthul's personal communicator buzzed with an emergency message from his ship. When he read it, his scaled skin turned a darker shade of purple. "Impossible," he whispered. But the evidence was overwhelming. Humanity had not stumbled into galactic politics like a child wandering into an adult conversation. They had been planning, preparing, and building alliances for decades. Back in the Oval Office, Elizabeth concluded her speech with words that would be remembered long after the war ended. The Galaxy Council came to Earth expecting to find a primitive species ready to bow before their superior wisdom. Instead, they found humanity. "We bow to no one. We serve no master except the cause of freedom, and we will not surrender our children's future to beings who think strength gives them the right to rule others." She stood up from her desk, and the camera followed her to a window that looked out over Washington, D.C. In the sky above the city, the massive Council ships hung like storm clouds, their crystal hulls reflecting the afternoon sun. "Ambassador Zexthul, if you are watching this," she said without turning from the window, "you have 12 hours to remove your ships from our solar system. After that, we will consider your presence an act of war." The broadcast ended, but across the galaxy, the real show was just beginning. On dozens of worlds, species that had been slaves to the Council for centuries began to rise up. Ships that had been hidden in asteroid fields and gas giant atmospheres came online. Weapons that had been built in secret were moved to battle positions. The Council had expected to crush a primitive species in a matter of days. Instead, they found themselves facing a galaxy-wide rebellion, led by humans who had been planning this moment for 30 years. In his quarters aboard the Eternal Dominion, Fleet Commander Vexmar looked at tactical displays that showed his 72 ships surrounded by over 200 human vessels. His communications officer reported that Council fleets throughout the galaxy were under attack by rebels using human-supplied weapons and tactics. "How is this possible?" he asked his tactical officer. The answer came from an intercepted human transmission. It was Dr. Cross speaking to rebel leaders across the galaxy in a dozen different alien languages. "The Council's greatest weakness," Cross was saying, "is that they have never faced an enemy that refused to play by their rules. Today we change the rules. Today we show the galaxy what freedom looks like." Ambassador Zexthal sat in his guarded room and realized that everything he thought he knew about humanity was wrong. They were not a primitive species stumbling into galactic politics. They were conquerors who had been disguising themselves as primitives while they prepared to reshape the galaxy. The 12-hour deadline Elizabeth had given was not really about removing ships from Earth's solar system. It was about giving Council forces one last chance to surrender, before humanity showed the galaxy what happened when you threatened their home. Outside his window, Zexthal could see human ships rising from Earth's surface to join the fleet already in space. Each one was a reminder that the Council had made the greatest military miscalculation in galactic history. They had awakened humanity, and humanity was not interested in being ruled. The first shots of the war were not fired near Earth. They came from the other side of the galaxy, where species that had been slaves for centuries finally had the weapons and courage to fight back. Captain Rachel Turner sat in the command chair of her ship, the UES Shadow Strike. Her vessel was invisible to enemy sensors, hidden by technology that human scientists had developed with help from alien refugees. Through her ship's viewscreen, she watched the Vortanian home system burn. "Captain, we are receiving reports from all sectors," her communications officer said. "Uprisings on 12 worlds. The Kethmori have destroyed 3 Council shipyards. The aquatic people have taken back their water processing plants." Rachel smiled grimly. She was 34 years old and had been fighting secret battles against Council patrols for 5 years. Today, the secret war had become very public. "All human ships, this is Admiral Chang." A voice crackled through the quantum communicator. "Operation Checkmate is now active. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth." In Earth's solar system, the Council fleet that had come to force humanity's surrender found themselves surrounded by ships that should not have existed. Captain Roy Patterson's vessel, the UES Defiance, led a formation of heavy cruisers out from behind Jupiter's moons. Ambassador Zexthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching his tactical display with growing horror. When he had arrived at Earth, his sensors had detected a small number of primitive human ships. Now his screen showed over 200 vessels surrounding his fleet. "How many ships do they have?" he demanded of his sensor officer. "Unknown, Ambassador. They keep appearing from locations our scans showed as empty space." Fleet Commander Vexmar, the military leader of the Council force, had been in space battles for 40 years. He had never seen anything like this. Human ships moved in patterns that made no sense according to standard tactical doctrine. They used weapons that his shields were not designed to stop. "All ships open fire," Vexmar ordered. "Destroy the human fleet." The Council ships launched energy beams that could cut through mountain ranges. But the human ships were no longer where the targeting computers said they should be. They moved like dancers, spinning and weaving between the energy blasts. Captain Patterson watched the enemy fire pass harmlessly by his ship. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Steve Brooks, was coordinating with 30 other human vessels to surround the Council flagship. "Enemy weapons are designed to fight other Council ships," Brooks reported. "Their energy beams work great against energy shields, but our armor plating is made from materials they have never encountered." "What about their fighters?" Patterson asked. "Launching now, sir. Point defense systems are tracking." The Council fighters were small, fast ships designed to swarm around larger vessels and attack weak points. They had worked perfectly against every enemy the Council had ever faced. But they had never faced human point defense systems. Human ships sprouted hundreds of small gun turrets that fired solid projectiles at incredible speed. The projectiles were tiny, But when they hit something moving at high velocity, the impact was devastating. Council fighters began exploding in brilliant flashes of light. "This is impossible," Fleet Commander Vexmar said, watching his tactical display show fighter after fighter disappearing. "Their weapons should not be effective against our technology." His science officer, a being with 6 eyes and blue skin, looked up from her instruments with something like fear. "Sir, I am analyzing their weapon signatures. They are not using energy weapons at all. They are firing solid projectiles accelerated to approximately 12% of light speed." Vexmar stared at her. "Kinetic weapons? But those are primitive. No civilized species uses kinetic weapons in space. The humans are not fighting like a civilized species, sir." On Earth, General Jake Morrison watched the battle through feeds from human ships. He stood in a command center buried deep under a mountain in Colorado, surrounded by officers who had been planning this day for decades. "Our ships are performing better than expected," reported Colonel Danny Reeves, who commanded the Marine units aboard human vessels. "Council doctrine is exactly what Dr. Cross predicted. They fight in formation, follow standard patterns, and expect their enemies to do the same." Morrison nodded. "What about ground operations?" "Resistance forces on 8 worlds have taken control of major cities. Our Marines are leading assault teams on Aquatica Prime. The water people there have been waiting 20 years for this chance to fight back." On the water world of Aquatica Prime, Colonel Reeves himself led a combined force of human Marines and native fighters in an attack on a massive processing facility. The Council had been using the planet's population as slave labor for decades, forcing them to purify water for shipment to other worlds. "Remember, we are here to liberate, not conquer," Reeves told his mixed force of humans and aquatic aliens. "Every civilian we save is a victory. Every facility we capture intact can be used to help rebuild their world." The aquatic people looked like dolphins that could walk on land. They had been peaceful before the Council arrived, but 20 years of slavery had taught them to hate their oppressors. They fought with a fury that impressed even veteran human Marines. "The facility is surrounded," reported Staff Sergeant Lisa Williams, the first woman to lead a Marine unit in combat against alien forces. "Enemy forces are requesting terms for surrender." "No terms," said Kethsa, the leader of the aquatic resistance. "They showed no mercy to our children. They will receive none from us." But Colonel Reeves held up his hand. "We are better than they are. That is why we fight. Offer them one chance to surrender. If they refuse, then we do what we must." Back in Earth's solar system, the battle was turning into a rout. Council ships designed to fight stand-up fleet engagements could not cope with human tactics that emphasized speed, deception, and overwhelming firepower focused on single targets. Captain Patterson's ship closed to point-blank range with the Council flagship. At this distance, the alien ship's energy weapons could not track fast enough to hit the smaller, more maneuverable human vessel. "Target their engine section," Patterson ordered. "We want to capture that ship, not destroy it." The Defiance fired a concentrated barrage of kinetic projectiles at the flagship's propulsion systems. The solid slugs, moving at tremendous velocity, punched through the alien ship's hull like bullets through paper. "Direct hits," Lieutenant Commander Brooks reported. "Enemy vessel is losing power and maneuverability." On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Ambassador Zexthul felt his ship shudder as human weapons tore through its defenses. Smoke filled the air, and several of his crew members were injured by flying debris. "Damage report," Fleet Commander Vexmar demanded. "Engines offline. Weapons at 30% power. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. His damage control officer replied. Through the viewscreen, Vexmar could see human ships surrounding his vessel. They were close enough that he could make out details of their construction. The ships looked crude compared to Council vessels, but they were undeniably effective. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the human flagship," his communications officer reported. "Put it on screen." Captain Patterson appeared on the main viewer. He looked like any human soldier, unremarkable except for his eyes, which held the confidence of someone who had just won an impossible victory. "Council ships, this is Captain Patterson of the United Earth Forces. Your fleet is defeated. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Continue fighting, and we will destroy every vessel in your formation." Fleet Commander Vexmar looked at his tactical display. Of the 72 ships he had brought to Earth, 31 had been destroyed or disabled. The remainder were surrounded by human vessels that had proven far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. "We surrender," he said quietly. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as Council forces found themselves overwhelmed by rebellions they had not seen coming. Species that had been conquered decades or centuries ago were rising up with human weapons and human tactical advice. Dr. Alan Cross, now serving as humanity's chief coordinator for rebel forces, monitored the situation from his command center on Earth. His screen showed status reports from 40 different star systems where the war was raging. "The Council is falling back to fortified positions," he reported to President Elizabeth Harper during an emergency briefing. They were not prepared for coordinated resistance across multiple sectors simultaneously. Elizabeth nodded. "Casualties? Lower than projected on our side, much higher than expected on theirs. They are learning that ruling through fear only works when your subjects are afraid. Today the galaxy stopped being afraid. The war had begun with humanity's refusal to surrender. It was continuing with victories that proved humans were far from the primitive species the Council had expected to crush. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 5,000 years. They would not give up their power easily. The real test would come when they stopped underestimating their opponents and started fighting back with everything they had. But for now, humanity and their allies had won the first round. The galaxy had seen what happened when you threatened Earth and demanded surrender. 3 months after the first battle, the war had spread across the entire galaxy. What started as humanity's refusal to surrender had become a revolution that touched every star system under Council rule. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of her fast attack ship, the UES Razor's Edge. Through the view screen, she watched another Council supply convoy burn in the darkness of space. Her squadron of mixed human and alien ships had just completed their 15th successful raid this month. "Target destroyed, Captain," reported her weapons officer. "That was their last transport." Maria nodded. She was 29 years old and had spent the last 3 months perfecting the art of hit-and-run warfare. Her ships would appear from hyperspace, attack Council supply lines, and disappear before enemy reinforcements could arrive. "Any word from the other squadrons?" she asked. Squadron 7 hit a fuel depot in the Rigel system 2 hours ago. Squadron 12 destroyed a weapons factory near the Council capital. The enemy is having trouble keeping their fleet supplied. The war had evolved beyond simple battles between fleets. Dr. Alan Cross, working from his command center on Earth, had turned scattered resistance movements into a unified campaign that struck at the heart of Council power. The Council's biggest weakness, Cross had explained to rebel leaders across the galaxy, is that they depend on a centralized system. Cut their supply lines and their fleets cannot operate. Destroy their factories and they cannot build new ships. Take their communication centers and they cannot coordinate their forces. It was working. Council fleets that had seemed invincible 3 months ago were now running low on fuel and ammunition. Planets that had been loyal to the Council for centuries were declaring independence and joining the rebellion. General Jake Morrison, now coordinating military operations across dozens of star systems, had established training programs that taught human warfare tactics to alien resistance fighters. His Marines, led by experienced officers like Colonel Beth Wright, had become legends among oppressed populations throughout Council space. Colonel Wright stood in a training facility on the desert world of Karos, watching a mixed group of humans and reptilian aliens practice urban combat techniques. The Karosians had been miners for the Council for 200 years, but now they were learning to be soldiers. "Human warfare is different from what you have seen before," Wright explained to the assembled fighters. "The Council fights to maintain control. We fight to win the peace that comes after victory. Every enemy soldier we capture alive is someone who might join us later. Every civilian we protect is someone who will remember that we came to liberate, not conquer." The Karosian leader, a scarred veteran named Vexthok, raised one of his clawed hands. "What if they refuse to surrender? What if they would rather die than accept defeat?" Wright's expression was grim but determined. "Then we honor their choice, but we always offer them the chance to live." The training programs were paying off. Resistance forces throughout the galaxy were using human tactics to win battles they could never have won, using traditional methods. Small groups of fighters were defeating much larger Council forces by refusing to fight fair. Meanwhile, the political situation was changing just as dramatically as the military one. President Elizabeth Harper had become the unofficial leader of a coalition that included 47 different species, each with their own reasons for opposing council rule. The old system was based on fear, Harper explained during a broadcast that reached every rebel-controlled world. Species obeyed the council because they were afraid of being destroyed. But fear only works when people believe they have no choice. Today the galaxy has a choice. The choice was becoming clearer every day. On the water world of Aquatica Prime, Colonel Danny Reeves had helped establish the first free government the planet had seen in 50 years. The aquatic people were working with human engineers to rebuild their cities and restore their damaged ecosystem. Freedom is not just about winning battles, Reeves told a gathering of local leaders. It is about building something better than what came before. The council ruled through force. We will govern through cooperation. But the council was not giving up without a fight. As their situation became more desperate, they began using weapons and tactics that they had banned for centuries. The turning point came at the Battle of Nexus Station, a massive space facility that served as a hub for council military operations in 3 different sectors. Admiral Lisa Chang herself led the assault, commanding a fleet of human and allied vessels in the largest space battle since the war began. Nexus Station is the key to their entire defensive strategy in this part of the galaxy, Chang explained to her fleet commanders during the pre-battle briefing. If we can take it, we cut off supplies and reinforcements to council forces in dozens of star systems. The station was heavily defended. Council forces had learned from their earlier defeats and were no longer underestimating human capabilities. They had positioned their ships in overlapping defensive formations and installed weapons that were specifically designed to counter human tactics. They are expecting us to use hit-and-run attacks, reported Captain Patterson, now commanding a battle group of 30 ships. Their new defensive setup is designed to prevent fast-moving vessels from getting close to the station. Chang studied the tactical displays showing enemy positions. The council had indeed learned from their losses, but they were still thinking like the council. They expected their enemies to adapt to their defenses, not the other way around. Then we will not use hit-and-run attacks, she decided. We will do something they do not expect. We will attack them head-on with everything we have. The battle lasted 14 hours. Human ships designed for speed and maneuverability charged directly at council defensive positions. It seemed like suicide, but Chang had a plan that took advantage of something the council had never encountered before. Human ships were not fighting alone. Mixed in with each human vessel were 2 or 3 ships from allied species, each one contributing different capabilities to the overall attack. The Keth Mori provided energy weapons that could penetrate council shields. The aquatic people had developed torpedo systems that could change direction in flight. The reptilian fighters from Karos brought boarding pods that could cut through station hulls. This is impossible, said Council Fleet Commander Yexnal as he watched the combined assault tear through his defenses. No species has ever coordinated this many different weapon systems in a single battle. His tactical officer, a being with gray skin and oversized eyes, looked up from her instruments with something approaching awe. Sir, they are not fighting as separate fleets. They are fighting as one fleet with many different types of ships. Each species is supporting the others. The concept was so alien to Council thinking that Yexnal had trouble understanding it. The Council maintained power by keeping species separate, preventing them from working together. But humans had done the opposite, creating a military force that was stronger because of its diversity, not in spite of it. All ships concentrate fire on the station's main power core, Chang ordered as her fleet broke through the outer defenses. Boarding parties prepare for assault. Captain Rachel Turner's stealth ship had been waiting for this moment. Her vessel appeared directly beside Nexus Station, having approached while cloaked during the main battle. Marines led by Colonel Wright poured out of her ship and began cutting their way into the station's hull. Resistance is lighter than expected, Wright reported as her teams moved through the station's corridors. Most of the garrison was moved to the defensive fleet. The capture of Nexus Station marked the moment when the war shifted from a rebellion to a war of liberation. Council forces throughout the galaxy began retreating to fortified positions around their most important worlds. Species that had been neutral declared for the rebellion. Even some council member species began secretly negotiating with human representatives. Dr. Cross, analyzing intercepted council communications, discovered something that changed the entire strategic situation. The council is not united, he reported to President Harper during a classified briefing. Several member species are questioning the war. Others are actively working against the military leadership. If we can exploit these divisions, we might be able to end this without destroying the galaxy. Harper nodded thoughtfully. The war had accomplished more than anyone had expected, but it had also shown the terrible cost of galactic conflict. Billions of beings had been killed or displaced. Entire worlds had been devastated. If there was a way to achieve victory without further destruction, humanity had to try. "What do you recommend?" she asked. "We offer them a choice," Cross replied. "The same choice you offered Ambassador Zexthal at the beginning. Surrender and accept negotiation, or continue fighting until there is nothing left to fight for. The next phase of the war would determine whether the galaxy could find peace through victory, or whether the conflict would continue until one side or the other was completely destroyed. But for now, humanity and their allies had proven that the Council could be defeated. The tide of war had turned and freedom was winning. 1 year after Ambassador Zexthal had demanded Earth's surrender, he found himself signing a very different document. The Treaty of Sol was being signed aboard the human warship UES Defiance, the same vessel that had led the attack on his flagship during the war's first battle. President Elizabeth Harper stood at the center of the ship's main conference room, surrounded by representatives from 47 different species. Some had been enemies just months before. Others had fought alongside humanity from the beginning. All of them were here to witness the birth of a new galactic government. "Today marks not the victory of one species over another," Harper said to the assembled delegates, "but the triumph of cooperation over domination. The galaxy belongs to all of its people, not just the strongest among them." Admiral Lisa Chang, now wearing the uniform of the United Galactic Defense Force, accepted surrender documents from Council military commanders who had spent the war's final months fighting desperate retreats across multiple star systems. The formal end of Council supremacy had come not through total military defeat, but through political collapse as member species abandoned a government that could no longer protect them. The path to this moment had not been easy. After the capture of Nexus Station, the war had continued for 9 more months as die-hard Council forces refused to accept defeat. But Dr. Alan Cross's diplomatic efforts had gradually split the Council from within. The secret was offering them something better than what they had, Cross explained to a group of reporters covering the treaty signing. The Council ruled through fear. We offered partnership. The Council demanded obedience. We offered respect. Eventually, even their own member species realized which system served them better. The new galactic government would be headquartered on Harmony Station, a massive orbital facility being built in neutral space between Earth and the former Council capital. The station was a joint project between human engineers and architects from a dozen different species, designed to be a symbol of cooperation rather than domination. Captain Rachel Turner, now commanding the exploration vessel UES Horizon, had led the first joint expedition to scout locations for the new capital. Her crew included beings from 8 different species, all working together in ways that would have been impossible under Council rule. "The most amazing thing about working with so many different species," Turner had reported, "is how much we can accomplish when everyone contributes their strengths. The aquatic people are incredible at life support systems. The Kethamori have energy technologies we never dreamed of. The reptilian engineers from Karos can build structures that will last for thousands of years." General Jake Morrison, now serving as Director of Galactic Security, had the challenging job of maintaining peace during the transition. Some former Council forces had refused to accept the new government and were conducting guerrilla operations against civilian targets. "The hardest part of winning a war," Morrison explained to his security chiefs, "is keeping the peace afterward. There will always be those who preferred the old system, especially those who held power under it. Our job is to show them that the new system works better for everyone, including them." Colonel Beth Wright had established training academies on a dozen worlds where former enemies learned to work together. Human Marines trained alongside former Council soldiers, teaching and learning from each other. "The goal is not to create one unified military," Wright told her instructors. "It is to create military forces that can work together when needed, while respecting each species' own traditions and methods." The transformation was not without challenges. On some worlds, centuries of resentment led to conflicts between species that had been oppressed and those that had served as oppressors. President Harper found herself mediating disputes that sometimes seemed impossible to resolve. Justice and revenge are not the same thing, she told a gathering of planetary leaders who were struggling with post-war problems. We must remember that our goal is to build a better future, not to punish the past endlessly. Ambassador Zexthul, who had spent the war in protective custody on Earth, had undergone a remarkable transformation of his own. The arrogant being who had demanded humanity's surrender had gradually come to understand that his species had been part of a system that caused enormous suffering throughout the galaxy. I spent my entire life believing that the Council's rule was necessary for galactic peace, he said during his testimony before the War Crimes Tribunal. I thought that young species like humanity were dangerous because they had not learned to be civilized. I was wrong. The Council was the dangerous one. We had forgotten that true civilization comes from choice, not force. His species, the Vortanians, had been among the first to join the new galactic government. They provided their advanced communication technology to help coordinate the new federal system that allowed each species to govern itself while participating in galaxy-wide decisions. Dr. Cross, now serving as Secretary of Interspecies Affairs, oversaw the complex process of integrating 47 different governmental systems into a structure that worked for everyone. It was the most complicated political project in galactic history. The key insight, Cross explained to political scientists studying the new system, is that diversity is a strength, not a weakness. Each species brings different perspectives and capabilities. The challenge is creating institutions that let them work together without forcing them to become the same. 5 years after the Treaty of Sol, the galaxy was unrecognizable from what it had been under Council rule. Trade flowed freely between species that had once been forbidden to contact each other. Scientific cooperation had led to technological advances that benefited everyone. Most importantly, no single species or group could dominate the others. Captain Maria Santos, now commanding a mixed-species exploration fleet, led expeditions to uncharted regions of the galaxy. Her ships included crew members from 20 different species, all working together to discover new worlds and make contact with species that had remained hidden during the Council era. We have found 17 new civilizations in the past year, Santos reported during a scientific conference on Harmony Station. Each one has been approached with respect and offered friendship, not domination. Some have chosen to join our alliance. Others prefer independence. We respect both choices. The old Council's method of forcing young species to surrender had been replaced by patient diplomacy and offers of mutual benefit. Species were free to develop at their own pace, with help available when requested but never forced upon them. President Harper, now in her second term as leader of the Galactic Alliance, often reflected on the day when Ambassador Zexthul had demanded Earth's surrender. The memory always made her smile. He told us we had to surrender because we were young and dangerous, she said during a speech commemorating the war's end. He was half right. We were dangerous to anyone who thought strength gave them the right to rule others. But we were not too young to understand freedom. We were just old enough to fight for it. The transformation had not been limited to government and military affairs. Cultural exchange between species had created new art forms, new music, and new ways of understanding the universe. Human literature was being translated into dozens of alien languages. Alien philosophy was being studied in Earth's universities. General Morrison, now retired but still occasionally called upon for advice, lived on a farm in Montana where he grew crops using agricultural techniques learned from farmers on 6 different worlds. The galaxy we have built is not perfect, he told young military officers who came to learn from his experience. No government is perfect, but it is better than what came before, and it continues to improve because people can speak freely about problems and work together to solve them. The war that had begun with humanity's refusal to surrender had ended with the creation of something no one had imagined possible. A galaxy where freedom was not just an ideal, but a reality for billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Ambassador Zexthul, now serving as his species representative to the Galactic Assembly, often walked through the corridors of Harmony Station and marveled at what he saw. Beings from dozens of different worlds worked together, argued with each other, and then went to lunch together. It was chaotic compared to the rigid order of the old council, but it was also alive in a way the council had never been. I still do not fully understand how humans accomplished this, he confided to Dr. Cross during one of their regular meetings. By every reasonable analysis, the council should have won. Otter smiled and looked out at the busy corridors, where the future of the galaxy was being shaped by beings who had once been enemies. You made the same mistake every empire makes, he replied. You thought that controlling people was the same as leading them. Humans learned long ago that real strength comes from cooperation, not domination. When the council demanded our surrender, we showed the galaxy what happens when free people work together. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest weapon was not their ships or their tactics, but their stubborn refusal to accept that things had to stay the way they were. When faced with an ultimatum to surrender their freedom, humans had smiled and said no. That simple act of defiance had changed everything.